Hey everyone, Marilynn Hughes from the Out of Body Travel Foundation. Today I want to talk about the rooting out as it relates to the purification process. I actually had a mystical experience telling me to do this live stream, that it was very important to help instruct souls who are sincerely seeking the purification to better understand this part of it. Part of the reason for that is because during the rooting out period, many souls are actually more vulnerable than any other time to fall away from the spiritual path. And that is in part because the shame, the guilt that erupts and arises when we are corrected through God in our out of body travel experiences or those that are shared with us by others is that, hi, Tamago, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And so, what happens with people who are having this experience, um, there's a couple of things that happen. One is that, hi, John, welcome to our chat, our live chat, live stream. That people go through this like crash. It's a crash because there's a sense that they are upset that they may have let God down or that they um, have not, lived up to what they thought they were doing. And what we don't realize is that this is actually the very nature of the purification process and the mystical theology journey and the spiritual purification journey. And so, what we're going to try to talk about here is how we can help people to move through the rooting out a little more smoothly, because this natural propensity to crash is the moments when a soul is the most vulnerable to actually falling away from their spiritual path towards God for a variety of reasons. One being just feeling badly that they had not realized that there were these issues within them and they feel that they have let God down. But there's also just the natural things that arise, which is, this is too hard. This is too intrusive, you know. But what we're not recognizing is the great mercy of God, which is the most important part, but also the fact that God corrects those whom he loves. And so I have some texts that I would like to read to you about this problem. Welcome, Anna. Great to see you again. And we're talking about the rooting out. I'm going to start with something from one of my favorite writers, which is Father Adolphe Tanqueray, The Spiritual Life. I had a couple of things in here that I felt really help people to better understand the rooting out process. Hello, Saint Neo, Romania. That's awesome. Thank you for joining us from Romania as well. And so here we are. We're going to start here. This is actually in the introduction. In order to grasp their meaning, we must needs place them in their proper setting, harmonize them with analogous teachings, and lastly, arrange them and interpret them in the light of the sum total of Christian truths. And he's speaking of, these things that are brought to our attention that are in the process of being rooted out. Once this first work is done, we may draw conclusions from these principles, show their legitimacy and their manifold applications to the 1,001 details of human life in its most varied situations. Lastly, these principles and conclusions will be coordinated into one vast synthesis and thus will constitute a real science. Welcome, Andrew. We are happy to have all of you here. It is likewise the work of reason to defend ascetical doctrine against its detractors. Many attack it in the name of reason and science, seeing nothing but illusion in what embodies sublime reality. It is in the province of reason to make answer to such criticisms with the aid of philosophy and science. And so here is where Father Tanqueray is talking about understanding this spiritual path, which involves the purification and the rooting out that we're focusing on today, is a very important and pivotal aspect of the purification process. He says, spirituality is a science that is lived. It is important, therefore, to show historically how it has been carried out in practice. This requires the reading of the biographies of the saints, both ancient and modern, who lived in diverse countries and under different conditions. Thus, we make sure of the way in which ascetical rules were interpreted when adapted to different epochs and peoples and to peculiar duties of state. More, since the members of the church are not all holy, we must be thoroughly acquainted with the obstacles encountered in the practice of perfection and with the means employed to surmount them. And so he's laying out how important it is to understand this process that we're all talking about. And so then we move on in this direction. And we have, for instance, here's an important point, because one of the things that occurs in the spiritual life, and it's a pretty much something that happens to everybody who follows it, is that we receive spiritual consolations. We'll have these, pivotal experiences and stuff. And then we will be corrected. And this is the rooting out. And it becomes difficult for the soul to go back and forth from receiving this love and support, and then the correction, which can be devastating to us because, we all have egos, and we also have a lot of things that we just don't see about ourselves. And ironically, this is the reason why the process of out-of-body travel and mysticism is such an acceleration, because through it, there is that window into the truth that we would not see any other way. We would not bring it forth to our consciousness. And so when it comes up, and it comes up often quickly, suddenly, and we're just facing something about our character that needs addressing, it can have that devastating impact on the person. They get down, they get depressed. And so here he's saying, some taking spiritual consolations for fervor think they have arrived at perfection if they are filled with joy and can pray with ease. And they consider themselves lukewarm when they are seized with aridity and distractions. Such persons forget that what counts before God is the generous, often renewed effort despite apparent failures. Let me see. Saint Neo, purification is not true, that also from badness can come goodness. Goodness? So that's a question. Yes, purification, but we also need to experience badness to know what really is on your own skin. Sorry for my English. No problem, Saint Neo. Again, from Romania. Very cool to have you with us. So it's not that we have to experience badness or darkness or evil. It's more that we sometimes do because of our human nature. And it is what we do with this darkness, badness, or evil that either comes about around us or in our own spirit, that we can then pull that forward and transform it into something greater. And the way we do that is this rooting out. So we have to first identify, and very often we will not identify something as fully or completely until the Lord has pointed it out to us, either through a deep spiritual dream or a mystical experience or out of body travel. And when it is brought to our attention, we will also feel those vibrations of the true nature of that defect that we have. And that's where that crashing comes from, because it's like, I thought I was doing okay, and I just realized that there is this great hindrance that is there that I did not see of my own accord. Sometimes we have no clue whatsoever. And so the crash, the depression, the sorrow, and, the shame and the guilt and the sorrow can be purposeful if it is truly contrition and then utilized for the alteration and the actual change that must occur within that soul and within your life and the way that you proceed forward. So, let's continue on this, because it's really important what Father Tanqueray is sharing about some of the misunderstandings people have about the spiritual life. Others, taken up by a life of action and external activities, neglect the interior life to give themselves more entirely to works of zeal. They forget that the life of and soul of all zeal is habitual prayer, which draws down the grace of God and gives fruitfulness to our actions. So this is really reiterating that all actions that we may, intend to go forward with that are of a good nature, that we want to do something useful for the realm or for God, need to be powered up and literally, held intact by deep prayer, a deep abiding prayer life, which actually energizes all of it. And so here he finishes by saying, others, having read mystical works or the lives of the saints in which ecstasies and visions are described, fancy perfection to consist in these extraordinary phenomena and strain their minds and imaginations to attain them. They have never understood that such phenomena are, as the mystics themselves testify, but incidental. I'm going to pause there, because they are tools. I speak so much about mysticism and out-of-body travel as a tool. And that makes them incidental, because they are not the truth. They are a tool by which we can find the truth. So I'm going to say that again and continue and finish his thoughts here. They have never understood that such phenomena are, as the mystics themselves testify, but incidental, that they do not constitute the essence of sanctity, and that it is foolhardy to covet them, that conformity to the will of God is by far the safer and more practical way. Having thus cleared the ground, we shall be able to understand more easily in what perfection essentially consists. And so again, when a soul begins and they start having these wonderful experiences, there can be a natural tendency to think that you have actually progressed further and beyond what you may have actually been able to do. Because what happens is God comes down, gives us the consolation, fills us with this knowledge of his love for us, because we need that. We need to be built up, and we need to have this energetic holding up, so to speak, in order for us to actually begin a true spiritual journey. But then as that spiritual journey progresses, he will require more of us. And as he does this, we experience what we call the rooting out. And so these incidences bring forward information about our defects and the things within us that we may not see. And then there is that tendency to become depressed, down, feel like you just, it's too much, you can't do it. But we don't realize that this is actually how it acts, the way that it progresses and has always progressed throughout time for all mankind in every religious tradition. And so here we go back and we just discuss the particular examination. And this arises because we start learning as the rooting out begins that we have to now actually actively engage in this examination of conscience, this examination of not only our own deeds, our own doings, but also of the views that we hold about good and evil and what things are in their highest truth. We're going to have a real purification. It's not going to just be, we're lifted up and we're happy and joyous and it's great. It's going to be a real transformation where all of those things and more have to be looked at by the soul. And so Father Tanqueray says here, the particular examination in the judgment of St. Ignatius is of greater moment than the general one, and of even more importance than meditation itself, because it enables us to run down one by one our defects and thus overcome them the more easily. Besides, if we examine ourselves thoroughly on some important virtue, we not only acquire that virtue, but all the others related thereto. Thus, whilst we advance in the practice of obedience, we perform at the same time acts of humility, of mortification, and we exercise ourselves in the spirit of faith. Likewise, to acquire the virtue of humility means that we are perfecting ourselves in the practice of obedience, of the love of God, of charity, since pride is the chief obstacle to the exercise of these virtues. There are, however, rules for the choice of the subject of examination and for the manner of performing it. And you can learn that by going through the actual Ignatian examen of consciousness, which is, the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. And that is the Jesuit rule. And it's a very accepted and very well-known way that people do an actual retreat where this examination takes place. But then we want to also remember what's happening when this rooting out is occurring. Because one of the most common misconceptions about this rooting out is that when something is brought to our attention, that means we have deeply failed God. And that's our pride talking, because our pride wants to tell us we're already there. We didn't need to do all this work. We didn't need to undergo this purification process. But when we're able to set aside that pride, we realize that God does not waste his time correcting those who will not listen. And so when you are thus corrected, what is it telling you? It's telling you that God's hand of predilection is upon you. This is an opportunity to actually raise up, to actually undergo a true purification. And purification can be painful. It's not like always bliss and joy. And in fact, there's a lot of difficulty throughout it because it is a real process. It's not a surface process. It's going to root out the deepest aspects of you that you see and that you don't see. It's going to root out the things you don't ever want to see or that you don't want others to see about yourself. And so this is from recently deceased Father Thomas Dubay, Fire Within, speaking about St. Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross and the gospel on prayer. And this speaks of what we should be really thinking of when the rooting out begins, what we should remind ourselves of so we don't get lost. Let me take a look here. St. Neo, a question, and I'm sorry for interrupting. No problem at all. I like to have the dialogue. So I love that. It is possible that after this life, God can put you to be a guardian angel for another human. That does happen. It doesn't change the nature of our being. So, for instance, many times people in our families will become guardian angels, but it doesn't mean that they turn into that order of creation. They would still remain a human spirit acting in the person of a guardian towards whether it's their grandchildren, their children. So that is common. And to guide this person in his or her life based on your own experiences you had in your life on earth, that absolutely happens. And at the same time, in an experience for you as guardian angel for your spiritual evolution and so on. Very well said there, Saint Neo, because that is actually true. And in my own traveling, I found that sometimes souls are actually doing this work as a penitential work, something that they have to make up for in their own formation during life, where they are bringing forward uh, this service, and it is to do this work um, to compensate for something that they may have neglected to do during life. So it actually does go both ways. There is mutual assistance in evolution that's working in that. And you'll find too that our ancestors are very involved in much more so than most of us realize. And our ancestors going back much further than many of us would even remember, as to great grandmothers and great great grandfathers going further back. This is something that really surprised me in my mystical adventures. And you might also find, we are getting ready to release The Lord of the Redemption, which is the third in the Redemption series. And it speaks a bit of this. You may find reading that series, there's 3 books in it. There's the Limb of the Redemption, the Christ of the Redemption, and the Lord of the Redemption. You might find them interesting based on your thoughts there. And Andrew, let me respond to you as well. That helps me a lot to know that God wouldn't bother to correct us if he didn't think we could do it. Absolutely. Absolutely. So he corrects us because he loves us. And absolutely, I'm glad that's coming across. That's what we want to come across. And this is what I'd like to read from Fire Within, that talks about what's happening when we are receiving correction. What is the greater purpose of this and how we can view it? So when the rooting out begins or continues with us, because it continues with us throughout our existence here in this realm, and frankly, afterlife, we continue it also. So let me read this from Father Thomas Dubay. Unfortunately, however, what we are calling worthy suffering is not common. And this is a principal reason why advanced prayer is not common, even though everyone is called to it. We have pious desires for a generalized carrying of the cross, but when the time comes, our desires dissolve like mist before the morning sun. Contrary to all of the evidence, Many of us assume that our progress in prayer will be furthered if only we find the right procedures, Occidental or Oriental, some method of meditation or centering. We treat contemplation as the result of performing an exercise and forget that it is infused by God, who gives his communion only to the extent that we are conformed to his Son. And then he says this. St. Teresa speaks of several principles regarding the trials that God sends to contemplatives. They are often severe, indeed intolerable, and of such a kind that they could not be borne were God not to give also special consolations. Because the Lord chastises those whom he loves, the more he loves prayerful people, and the higher he wishes to raise them. I'm going to read that again, because that is the core right there of what the rooting out is. Because the Lord chastises those whom he loves, the more he loves prayerful people, and the higher he wishes to raise them, the greater will be the hardships they must endure. In my own work of spiritual direction, I have seen this truth exemplified over and over again. I cannot recall a single case in which a directee has reached a lofty infused prayer without having suffered much and well. It is true, of course, that God gives help to commensurate to the sufferings he sends or permits. Teresa wrote to Jerome Gratian that, quote, after all, his majesty will give you help proportionate to your trials. And so, as you are suffering great trials, you will enjoy great favors too. St. Paul was of the same mind. You will have in you, he wrote to the Colossians, the strength based on his own glorious power, never to give in, but to bear anything joyfully. Teresa summarized the matter succinctly in one sentence. Love is the measure of our ability to bear crosses. And I want to just go back to this statement that Teresa made to Mr. Gratian, where she says, his majesty will give you help proportionate to your trials. So as you are suffering great trials, you will enjoy great favors too. One of the very common misunderstandings that a lot of people will talk about regarding the spiritual path, the spiritual life, is they think that if they are receiving the glorious experiences, that means they're there. When in fact, it usually means you are being prepared to go there. And as you are being given this strength, I'm so glad to hear that, Anna Yell. Thank you. You needed that right now. I'm really glad that that was helpful to you. So he's preparing you when the great experiences come for what will begin at some point, which will include this rooting out. And it is this great moment with souls where the despair, the sadness, the feeling overwhelmed by our own sins, by our own failings, can actually be a moment of great danger where we may turn away from the path completely, and or we will focus and move forward and realize that this predilection that is placed upon us does require a lot of us. It's not going to just be this joy and bliss. We will actually be pruned like a tree. We will be formed by these rooting outs and the subsequent transformations. And the best way for us to respond to that is to receive those corrections and honestly evaluate them. And yes, you may have natural responses to them, to crash, to burn, to feel like crap, all those things. But you want to come out of that as quickly as possible and focus on doing exactly what you were instructed to do, making the changes in that rooting out that will alter and transform as you move forward, because that is then the forward motion of the purification path. If we bat around and we're like, did I really do that? Or is it really that important? Or why does it matter? And all these kinds of things. That is our pride delaying our action. And our action is what continues to energize that purification path. And so St. Neo says, thank you for confirming my thoughts. You're very welcome. Some time ago, they were personal questions to God on some aspects from the afterlife. Well, and that is fantastic, because that is, how we go through these processes in the spiritual journey, by having that dialogue, that talking to God, asking him, because he does provide the answers to us. But sometimes he might do it in a different way than we anticipate or expect. And so we want to be listening, because it can happen in a different way. It doesn't have to happen in some grand vision. God may provide you with, falling into a certain path where someone else will instruct on the questions that you have, or some other way. And so this is, letting God do his thing, so to speak. And I wanted to move through some of these thoughts from St. Maria Faustina Kowalska, Divine Mercy in My Soul, from her diary, speaking of the same issues, which really helps us to not only understand what we are experiencing, but also to allow us to recognize this profound mercy of God that has come upon us. Do we see it as a mercy when God corrects us? It's a question we all need to ask, because it is a mercy. And St. Faustina is so eloquent at making these things simple for us. And so let me respond here. Andrew says, reminds me of the references to being forged through the fire of the Holy Spirit. Yes, it is very similar, and actually the same thing. Like metal being forged in the fire, picking up our cross and follow Jesus can be part of this forging process. That is absolutely true. Yes. St. Neo, he answers us with other people, mostly from my experience. Okay, and that is how it happens for many of us. And Judy, hi Judy, great to have you. Welcome. I love her. I have read it. The Lord led me to. Okay. Judy, I would love to know which one you are referring to. St. Faustina, probably. Judy is probably referring to St. Faustina. Yes, this is a very excellent book for all of us. And ironically, during the rooting out, it is helpful to have a text like hers, where the mercy of God is just really, poured out upon us, because that gives us the grace and the strength then to do these things we're talking about, which is to avoid the normal reactions. We let them happen. We don't focus on it if we do those things, but we want to pull ourselves out of it as quickly as possible. Thank you, Judy. Yes, Faustina's diary. The reason for that, so that we can engage in the action required to actually correct whatever the defect is that's been made clear to us. And so wanted to share some interesting things and just do a sequence of some of her experiences and thoughts with the Lord and with the Blessed Mother that I think really address the rooting out and this process of allowing God to continue to move and not getting really caught up in that moment, but focused on the action to correct, which is what actually energizes the furthering of the purification. So we're starting here on notebook 2. My soul was filled with peace and love. And the more I come to know the greatness of God, the more joyful I become that He is as He is. And I rejoice immensely in His greatness and am delighted that I am so little, because since I am little, He carries me in His arms and holds me close to His heart. Oh my God, how I pity those people who do not believe in eternal life. How I pray for them that a ray of mercy would envelop them too, and that God would clasp them to His fatherly bosom. O love, O Queen, love knows no fear. It passes through all the choirs of angels that stand on guard before His throne. It will fear no one. It reaches God and is immersed in Him as in its sole treasure. Excuse me. The cherubim who guards paradise with flaming sword has no power over it. O pure love of God, how great and unequaled you are. Oh, if souls only knew your power. Anna says, the climate we are experiencing in our country has brought a lot to the surface, I think. And, that is an excellent point, because we are seeing a purification that's going on in our external world now that is not, it's not unlike other difficult periods in history, but it's unlike what we were experiencing before in our own lives here, because we were going through a period of relative peacefulness, and all of a sudden the rooting out is now occurring of the corruption in the hearts of men, the dishonesty, and all those things. And so, yes, this is all part of purification as well. And we'll see as we move through these quotes what it is also a part of. But we'll get there, and I'll let you get to it as we move that way. So when will you do a live stream only for questions from us? You have an ocean of knowledge about the afterlife. We did one about a week ago, and we will do more of those. So absolutely, and I appreciate the feedback that you would like that. And so I can definitely plan to do the next live stream as a questions from you guys to me. And I love that. So we'll do that. And we'll try to get it up in the next week or so. So if not sooner, we'll just see what we can do. But continuing on with Saint Faustina here. I answered that I was suffering more that day than on other days, but that it was nothing, and that for the salvation of souls it was not too much. Oh, merciful Jesus, give me the souls of sinners. She's speaking about the work that she's doing mystically and in her prayers to process this purification of other souls. Again, creation continues to create. We are all called to give back to creation what creation has given to us. And so she is talking about that very process. And here she says, December 24th, 1936. During Holy Mass today, I was united in a particular way with God and His Immaculate Mother. The humility and love of the Immaculate Virgin penetrated my soul. The more I imitate the Mother of God, the more deeply I get to know God. Oh, what infinite longing envelops my soul. Jesus, how can you still leave me in this exile? I am dying of longing for you. Every touch of my soul by your wounds wounds me immensely. Love and suffering go together, yet I would not exchange this pain caused by you for any treasure, because it is the pain of incomprehensible delights. And these wounds of the soul are inflicted by a loving hand. If we could all just hear that, the moment we are experiencing a rooting out, how would that impact the way we receive it? Knowing that it is a loving hand that brings these things to the surface for us to address. And then we move on to number 848. And this is actually Christmas Day. While I was saying the chaplet, I heard a voice which said, and this is bolded, which means this is the words of Christ to her. Oh, what great graces I will grant to souls who say this chaplet. The very depths of my tender mercy are stirred for the sake of those who say the chaplet. Write down these words, my daughter. Speak to the world about my mercy. Let all mankind recognize my unfathomable mercy. And remember, we spoke a few minutes ago about what else does this portend? All the external purification we are seeing in the world. Thank you very much, Saint Neo. I am very honored by the fact that you like my statues. Back behind me is Saint Kateri Tekakwitha's world. And over there I have our sorrowful mother is in the center. And on the very far end, the pink one is our Immaculate Heart of Mary. Next to her is Saint Monica. And on the other side of the sorrowful mother, there is Saint Gertrude. And Saint Catherine of Siena is also there, but a little bit harder to see from here. But thank you. Thank you very much. I like them a lot too. So I appreciate that you do as well. And so we're talking about, again, as Anna had talked about, the external purification that we're seeing in the world around us. And so Jesus tells her, and this is in 1936 on Christmas Day, it is a sign for the end times. After it will come the day of justice. While there is still time, let them have recourse to the fount of my mercy. Let them profit from the blood and water which gushed forth for them. So again, Jesus is telling her that ironically, especially during these specific times that we live in, we want to have recourse to the chaplet of the divine mercy. So any of you who may not be familiar with the chaplet of the divine mercy, I encourage you to look it up. You can go to our website at outofbodytravel.org and under course of study, go to today's liturgy and hours, and there will be the divine mercy is in there, but you can also look it up and do your own research, which is just fine. Oh, that's awesome, Judy, that you pray the chaplet of the divine mercy every morning. Saint Neo, you like Saint Bernadette Subaru, and who wouldn't? Because she is incorruptible, and what a beautiful thing. And in fact, right over here outside of your view, I have a statue of Our Lady of Lourdes, and I also have one of Our Lady of Fatima. And so he's speaking of the apparitions at Lourdes, for those of you who may not be familiar with those things. Saint Bernadette Soubirous was the mystic who saw the Blessed Mother. And I actually have a statue of Saint Bernadette in my room over there. It's just a little one. But yes, and one of the things that was beautiful about Saint Bernadette was, like Saint Faustina and some of these other mystics like them, they were so simple and innocent and pure. And she was that way too. And so let's continue with what St. Faustina is saying. We're almost done with my little sequence that I wanted to share. And this is just an aspiration that came to her as she was praying and feeling the glory of the Lord and the mercy falling upon her. I want to bring out this importance of mercy. So when we experience this rooting out, we do not forget at that moment that we can call God's mercy down upon us. He's not correcting us to cause us pain or to tell us that we have been rejected. He's correcting us because, the irony being, we have become a sign of predilection, that God has looked with favor on us and realized and felt that correcting us could be fruitful and could bring us forward. And therefore, he offers that correction from the loving hand, as St. Faustina said, so that we can actually progress in the spiritual life. Progression in the spiritual life is real work. And this is a surprise to many because they think, well, the spiritual life should just be a fun thing that we do on the side, but it's actual work. And so here's this beautiful aspiration that St. Faustina then has, not very long after Christmas Day, after the Lord shared with her, the mercy is given to us for the end times. Jesus, lover of human salvation, draw all souls to the divine life. May the greatness of your mercy be praised here on earth and in eternity. O great lover of souls, who in your boundless compassion opened the salutary fountains of mercy, so that weak souls may be fortified in this life's pilgrimage. Your mercy runs through our life like a golden thread and maintains in good order the contact of our being with God. For he does not need anything to make him happy. So everything is solely the work of his mercy. When that rooting out comes upon you, remember, it is solely the work of his mercy. My senses are transfixed with joy when God grants me a deeper awareness of that great attribute of his, namely his unfathomable mercy. And you know, St. Faustina also was told by Jesus to spread the knowledge that God's greatest attribute is mercy. In these moments where the rooting out is occurring, remember God's greatest attribute is his mercy. He corrects us because of mercy. He corrects us through his mercy, and he reaches to us to progress because of his mercy, because he wishes for us to actually move forward and not stand still, which, you know, the irony a lot of us don't realize is that when we receive that rooting out, how much time the Lord has saved our soul. Because how much time would we have spent trying to uncover this particular fault or this particular defect that is within us? It could have gone on for many years, right? And so when we receive this, It's painful, but it is such a profound gift because it accelerates our path. If we act in accordance with it, we do the action required. And so we can go through our, uh, feeling bad and, being disappointed in ourselves, but then we want to return to action. Let's see what Saint Neo is saying. For our salvation from hell, I guess, was needed the sacrifice of the divine blood, the sacrifice of the Creator for what he created. The irony, is this true? Yes, it is, but that is a deep mystery of faith as to the meaning of this. I would point you to volume 1 of the Life and Biblical Revelations of the Venerable Anne Catherine Emmerich, where she had the visions which showed her in the beginning of this text, this first volume, the meaning of the blood and why the blood was necessary. And it is a very deep, mystical kind of understanding that comes to us. But there is also a theological way to approach that very same question. And so, depending on where your own propensities are, you can do one or both to try to understand the nature of how God has moved through all of humanity throughout time to help us to evolve further in our understanding and to help us to become more and more of what he created us to be. One of the things we understand about Christ is that he was a greater pattern, and his incarnation into this world was the Lord God Almighty bringing a new potential reality into physical incarnation, thus making that new greater pattern available to the rest of us. But we have to grab a hold of all the tools and all the processes that help us to seek out this energy. It's a vibration. It's a higher thrust. But there is much more to that. It's a deep question that you can go in many directions with. I hope what I'm saying is at least somewhat helpful there. And Stark Ether, welcome back. Nice to see you. Great to see you. I'm sorry I didn't say hello sooner. Great to see you. And so here we're going to finish up with Saint Faustina. And this is really important. It really sums up what we're talking about with the rooting out and all the various feelings and processes that we go through when it occurs, which is Jesus says to Saint Faustina, I am pleased with your efforts, O soul aspiring for perfection. But why do I see you so often sad and depressed? Tell me, my child, what is the meaning of this sadness and what is its cause? Faustina says, Lord, the reason for my sadness is that in spite of my sincere resolutions, I fall again into the same faults. I make resolutions in the morning, but in the evening, I see how much I have departed from them. Jesus responds, you see, my child, what you are of yourself. The cause of your falls is that you rely too much upon yourself and too little on me. But let this not sadden you so much. You are dealing with the God of mercy, which your misery cannot exhaust. Remember, I did not allot only a certain number of pardons. She responds, yes, I know all that, but great temptations assail me and various doubts awaken within me. And moreover, everything irritates and discourages me. Laugh because I think we all relate to that. Jesus responds, "My child, know that the greatest obstacles to holiness are discouragement and an exaggerated anxiety. These will deprive you of the ability to practice virtue. All temptations united together ought not disturb your interior peace, not even momentarily. Sensitiveness and discouragement are the fruits of self-love. You should not become discouraged, but strive to make my love reign in place of your self-love. Have confidence, my child. Do not lose heart in coming for pardon, for I am always ready to forgive you. As often as you beg for it, you glorify my mercy." And she responds, "I understand what is the better thing to do, what pleases you more, but I encounter great obstacles in acting on this understanding." And Jesus replies, "My child, life on earth is a struggle indeed, a great struggle for my kingdom. But fear not, because you are not alone. I am always supporting you. So lean on me as you struggle, fearing nothing. Take the vessel of trust and draw from the fountain of life for yourself, but also for other souls, especially such as are distrustful of my goodness." So we see here in Saint Faustina the struggle that we all experience. Talking with someone else about these things is mind-blowing. Well, great. I'm glad it's helpful, Saint Neo. Um, Glad to hear, Anna Yell, that this has been helpful. Great words of wisdom today. And Judy, I needed to hear this today. It's so dark out there. Yes, it is dark out there, but all of us are points of light, and we must preserve that light. We are coming now through times in our history where we must simply preserve that light. So, absolutely, we all relate to that, but let's keep that understanding simple, which is we're not being asked to do something really complicated. We're being asked to preserve the light. And how do we do that? We continue to follow the path of purification. And when the rooting outs occur, we keep in mind all these things, all these important understandings, which lead us to actually utilize the rooting out as transformation rather than as obstacle. Andrew says, "A beloved priest often told me to give all our burdens to Jesus, that he wants them. Thank you for sharing your time and wisdom so generously." Thank you. You're welcome, Andrew. And well said, because that is absolutely the case. Thank you, Judy. Yes, and I love your emojis. Preserve light in what way specifically? And St. Neo says, true words to Andrew. Let's talk about that. What Anna Yell is saying, preserve light in what way specifically? We are literally called to stand alone amongst the mass that may have very few points of light still existent. Each one of us holds that light for the different place that we may reside. We do that by practicing purification of ourselves and continuing that spiritual path and that journey, because what people do not understand is that when we become transformed in and of our own being, we are altering the thrust of the energy which moves from us through the universal field of being. And we are putting the light in there. We are holding the light by refusing to stop what we are doing in our spiritual advancement, by continuing to do it despite what may go on all around us. That's how we hold that light and preserve it, by holding the light of the traditions, of the path, of the journey, of the keys, of how souls actually reach the light and transformation within it. Excellent, Judy. Thank you. Holding the light through love. Well said. And I would love to just again remind you a book that I have coming out here probably within the next week here. The Lord of the Redemption will be talking about just that and much more. How do we hold the light through love? And what is love as vibration? How do we actually utilize love as vibration? Oh, you're very welcome, Aniel. And I'd like to thank everyone here for joining me. And Saint Neo, I would like to offer the opportunity here that when we finish this live stream, that we can take a 5-minute break and I can start another live stream where we will handle just your questions, all of your questions. So if any of you all want to respond, let me know if that's something you would like to do now. If you all have time to do that, we can absolutely do that. So if you could keep an eye out here, we will wrap up the rooting out and take a 5-minute break. And I'd like you all to come back and join me here on the live stream again. And we'll talk about the questions that you guys have and the things you want to talk about. So that sounds great. Sounds fun to me. I love talking to our members and hearing what what's going on in their minds and in their hearts and in their lives, and how we can all kind of help one another. Awesome. Okay, so thank you all for joining me for this live stream on the rooting out. I hope it was helpful. And thank you so much, John, for your super chat. Thank you so much. People can do a super chat and offer whatever you can afford to help support the Out of Body Travel Foundation. Let me share John's message. Marilynn, your inspired guidance to us today, especially for me, was priceless. Oh, thank you so much, John. I am very honored by that and very appreciated your thoughts and your super chats. And anyone can do that if you feel so inclined. And just a little reminder to everyone as well, we offer memberships at the Out of Body Travel Foundation YouTube channel now, and you can have a monthly subscription to our members only benefits, and that gives you a lot of opportunities, and there's perks, and you can check them out by clicking the join button on our YouTube page and just scrolling through the various hierarchy of angel options as to what you can do. And we appreciate that so much because it provides us with the opportunity to get to know one another, but also to continue the work of the foundation, which we strive to keep everything free for everybody in the world. And that's a challenge sometimes. So we appreciate that kind of help. So thanks all for joining. We'll be back in about 5 minutes to take all your thoughts, questions, and talk about what's going on with all of you. So I look forward to that. We'll see you in 5. Thank you so much for joining me.